Week 5 is over. We're heading into week 6, but before we do that, there's a ton of wide receivers on the waiver wire right now that demand your attention. I'm talking about guys that could potentially be top 24 wide receivers the rest of the season. Yes, that good. So in this video right now, we're going to break down those 7 wide receivers that you need to be adding in your fantasy leagues before your friends do. And we can start with Jaylen Tolbert, the third-year wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, who in my opinion is now a must-add in all fantasy leagues. I don't care if you're in a 10-team league. I don't care if you're in a 12-team league with small benches. Add this dude. And look, Tolbert was kind of on our radar because we had this information before week 5 began. Brandon Cooks, his knee, he was placed on IR. He'll miss at least 4 games. This is a 31-year-old wide receiver. Even if he's able to come back after just a bare minimum 4 games missed, maybe he's not 100%. Maybe he loses the job to Jaylen Tolbert if Tolbert starts to play better or just starts to continue to play well. He's already playing well this year. And then in week 5 on Sunday Night Football, in a tough matchup against the Steelers, Tolbert runs 89% of the routes. He's out there often for this Cowboys team, and he sees 26% of the targets, which actually led this team. It was ahead of Jake Ferguson, the tight end, ahead of CeeDee Lamb, the star wide receiver for Dallas. And this quality usage wasn't just a bunch of, empty targets. Like if you remember a Dallas wide receiver named Michael Gallup, he would earn those empty targets deep downfield, rarely ever bring them in. If he did, it was once in a blue moon. No, not the case for Jaylen Tolbert, who caught 70% of his targets, 7 catches on 10 targets, 87 yards, and a touchdown. The touchdown, if you watch this game, it came with less than 30 seconds left in the game on a 4th down and goal to win the game essentially for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, they trusted him in a key situation, the biggest key situation you could possibly find. So now we're through 5 games on the year, and this hasn't yet updated on Player Profiler for his performance where he just scored. We just showed you he just scored 21 fantasy points, so just keep that in mind. We're through 5 games, and in 3 of those 5 games, you've had a 14-point performance, 13-point performance, and now a 21-point performance, and that 21-point performance was in the first game without Brandon Cooks. So 3 out of 5 games, you're having a solid wide receiver too, definitely a flex play in your lineup in Jaylen Tolbert, and he's still available in over 80% of leagues. And the role right now for Tolbert is really good because he's seeing an average depth of target of 13 yards downfield. That's 15th in the NFL. This is like the perfect distance. It's the in-between distance. It's not too short to where you can't get these big plays, but it's not too deep downfield to where it's all like these Hail Mary type throws. No, it's 13.2 yards downfield, the perfect intermediate range in my opinion, and this is even more, let's just say it gets even rosier, even better for Jaylen Tolbert when you consider that he's not the focus of the defense, right? That's CeeDee Lamb. Even heck, that's Jake Ferguson, the tight end to some extent. Jaylen Tolbert is getting the beneficial matchups week in and week out for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if you're not super familiar with Tolbert, let me just give you a quick reminder here. In 2022, he was a 3rd-round pick, and this was a 3rd-round pick that had a lot of hype behind it. Amari Cooper is now gone from the Cowboys at this time. They needed a wide receiver. Michael Gallup was injured at that time. They needed a wide receiver opposite CeeDee Lamb, and right away we were getting reports like Jaylen Tolbert's going to start for this team as a rookie out of South Alabama. But man, oh man, that rookie season did not go as planned for Jaylen Tolbert. As you can see right here, across 8 games, he caught just 2 balls for just 12 yards. He would later come out that following training camp and basically say like, hey, I was coming from South Alabama. I wasn't ready to be a starter in the NFL in the biggest stage of them all potentially in terms of media coverage in the Dallas Cowboys. I just wasn't ready. I didn't know the playbook. I wasn't ready. And I mean, that's completely fair. I think that's pretty fair for like a 20-year-old kid to come into that situation. A lot of expectations. 2023, he plays an entire season and he starts to see more production. 36 targets, 22 receptions. Still not on the minds of a lot of fantasy people out there, but at least we're seeing, like Brandon Cooks was signed last year. He was healthy. He was playing well. At least we're seeing some development out of Tolbert. And in this year, he's starting to break out in year 3. As we mentioned, he already has 3 games of at least 13 fantasy points this year. He's a quality wide receiver. And look, I don't think he's going to finish as a top 24 wide receiver the rest of the way, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the top 36, pushing towards the top 30, depending on touchdowns. And I think he can overtake Brandon Cooks in a quality offense with a good quarterback that's going to pass the ball a lot. Heck, we just saw them pass the ball a lot on Sunday night. And that should only continue in this upcoming matchup because look at this. They're going to be at home, the Cowboys, against the Detroit Lions. Lions coming off of a bye. The point total on this one is 52.5 points. The Cowboys are home underdogs. I don't know if you know anything about betting, but home underdogs, especially with a big total like this, usually means a lot of passing for the home team historically, potentially another 40-plus pass attempts for Dak Prescott. That probably means you're looking at another 7-plus target game for Tolbert. He's a must start this week. Go pick him up. And you also want to pick up Darnell Mooney. I don't know what you're saying. Oh my God, the guy just scored 30 points. He was a top 5 wide receiver on the week. Of course, we're going to pick him up. He's not available in my league. Well, believe it or not, Mooney right now is available in 55% of fantasy leagues. Yes, which includes a ton of 10-team leagues even, and a lot of 12-team leagues. He's still out there right now. You should spend your #1 waiver priority on him if you can. Because after this week, there's no way he's going to be available in over 50% of leagues because he just had a monster week. We all saw it in prime time in a great game on Thursday Night Football. According to Fantasy Life, Mooney went out there, and per usual, he's running 97% of the routes. He's an every snap, every down player. But look at this right here. A 30% target share led this team. It was more than Drake London, who also had a solid game, who also earned a lot of targets, but it was Mooney who led the team in targets. Now, we should point out, Drake London left that game with an injury. He was gone for about a drive and a half or so. So during that time, Mooney did see some more targets, including a touchdown. So that does factor in. But even before that point and after Mooney was producing with London on the field, he ended up earning a massive 16 targets, a career high high 16 targets. He has 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like I said, he's already, as of this recording, a top 3 wide receiver on the week, puts up 35 fantasy points, just absolutely insane numbers. And in this game, at least in this specific game, he was the favorite #1 target of Kirk Cousins on a short week. And believe it or not, it could have gotten even better, because if you can see right here, this play, this was the big drop. You might have watched it live. Wide open drop. And not only is a wide open drop on the 15-yard line, look at this right here. He catches and turns. The cornerback slips. The cornerback slips right there. That's a potential another touchdown, because there's nobody else behind that cornerback. If he gets into the end zone, he's at least picking up another 5-10 yards and 30 total yards in the play, and a potential another touchdown. It could have been an even bigger day. So like we did with Jaylen Tolbert, let's look at the box scores here. We just had that 30-point performance that's not yet updated on Player Profiler, but outside of that, a 17-point performance, top 20 finish, and over 14-point performance right here. So now in 5 games this season, and that includes week 1 when the entire offense looked terrible. Obviously, Kirk Cousins in this offense looks a lot better since then, but in 5 games this season, 3 times you're getting at least 14 points out of Darnell Mooney. A great player in any fantasy lineup, should not be on any benches with that, and he should definitely not be on this many waiver wires. Like, there was not a lot of hype around Darnell Mooney this offseason. We talked about him as a guy who was a nice late round ad because they paid him a lot of money, and the fact is he was just in a bad situation these last couple of years. He had a terrible play caller, he had bad quarterback play from Justin Fields, and an offense that ranked bottom 3 in pass attempts per game the last 2 seasons. But now when he has an improved play caller, a quarterback that is trending up in Kirk Cousins, and an offense that at least right now is trending in the right direction and looks a lot better. For a guy who is out there getting a lot of targets from Kirk Cousins, reminder, this guy has 4.3 speed, and not only that, he's known as like a downfield receiver, can create these big plays, but at least the last 2 games, we're seeing Mooney have a ton of contested catches. You saw it on Thursday Night Football multiple times, including one of his touchdown catches, going up in double coverage. Contested catches for this type of guy, if he adds that, it's a dangerous game. Next up on the docket for Darnell Mooney is another great matchup. They're going to be going on the road to Carolina, but it doesn't even matter. This game also has a high total. We're finally seeing some higher totals in the NFL right now. 49-point total would be one of the highest we've seen across the first 4 weeks or so, and not a lot of scoring was happening. Coming off of a big scoring week, we're seeing more high totals, but right here you can see Carolina Panthers, they are allowing right now the second most receiving yards per play. Second most receiving yards, passing yards per play, whatever you want to call it. That's what's happening. Another great matchup for Drake London, Kyle Pitts to some extent, but also Darnell Mooney, who's on waivers right now. As you can see right here, these are my waiver wire, trying to give a little bit of a teaser here, not show the whole thing. These are my waiver wire tiers and rankings for this week. I just sent them out to 21,000 other people. This is the running back and wide receiver position. I ranked 20 plus running backs, receivers, and a bunch of tight ends and quarterbacks as well. Darnell Mooney #1, Jaylen Tolbert #2, as you can see right here in the waiver wire tiers and rankings that drop every single week. Now, if you want to get access to these, you might be thinking, how can I get access to those? Well, you can right now. All you, the beautiful person, has to do to get those tools is get my fantasy blueprint. And how do you get access? Well, as it says right here, you just follow these 2 simple steps linked down below, and that will take you to this page right here where you sign up through one of our 2 partners. And the key is when you sign up through one of our 2 partners this season, look at this right here, the blueprint, my fantasy blueprint with all the tools that I send you every day during the week to help you win your matchup, get to the playoffs, win a championship. The blueprint becomes absolutely risk-free when you sign up through one of our partners. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means it's a one-time payment of $10 through our partners, and if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, you get your $10 right back. You just ask for it, and bada bing, bada bang, you get it right back. So if you would like to get access to my waiver wire tiers and rankings, and my trades tool, my projections and rankings weekly, matchup notes, and a whole lot more with 20,000 other people, you can scan the QR code that's been on the screen right here. I'll give you a second to do that, or you can click the link in the description below, follow the 2 simple steps. Right now is the time that you need to either improve your team or continue that stride into the postseason for fantasy. Go get this tool. All right, the next man up, I'm going to keep saying it like week in and week out. I'm here, people. Listen. You've been probably watching these videos every single week. If you're new here, welcome. But look, every single week, every video he's been in, Josh Downs, I've said to add this guy. I'm going to continue to say to add it because he's available in over 60% of fantasy leagues right now, which is crazy to me because look at this right here. His teammate, Michael Pittman, you all know Michael Pittman, right? Michael Pittman, a lot of people think he's the wide receiver 1 on the Colts. I don't believe that. I think it's Josh Downs, at least right now. Michael Pittman's not available in 1% of leagues. What does that mean? He's rostered in 99% of leagues. Even though Josh Downs, in my opinion, the true #1 receiver on this team, is available in over 60% of leagues right now. That's a massive mistake. Because since Josh Downs returned from injury in week 3, which he came back from a high ankle sprain very quickly, he's earned a 29%, 33%, and 27% target share. Team highs all 3 of those weeks. Over that span, that's a 30% target share. Again, a team high during this stretch ahead of Michael Pittman. And during that time, he's posted games of 5.2, 22.2, and 15.9 fantasy points. And that most recent performance of 15.9 fantasy points, depending on your scoring format, in a nice matchup against Jacksonville, but that's exactly the defenses you should be taking advantage of. He does it on a season high 12 targets, catches 9 of those for 69 yards. Now, he did do this in a game and the past 2 weeks in general where he's had his big games with Joe Flacco, who might not be there as soon as this week with Anthony Richardson expected to return from a hip injury. But man, oh man, Downs is too talented to ignore. This is a guy who is dominating out of the slot right now, and once in a while he'll actually go on the outside as well, and I think that that type of role will work very well with Richardson, who needs to improve his accuracy. Dead last in the NFL, completing just 50% of his passes. You know what will help that? A wide receiver who can win out of the slot, get open in the short to intermediate sides of the fields, and win after the catch in Josh Downs. This is going to be the guy that they game plan around, in my opinion, and even at times on the outside. And here's an interesting stat for you. So far this season, Josh Downs has 10 targets on third or fourth down. The money downs, the important downs where you have to rely on one player. And if I once again pull up his competition in the wide receiver room here, most notably Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and Adonai Mitchell, these guys combined have just 11 targets on third and fourth down on the year. So combined, they have just one more target than Josh Downs, and they've played 2 more games than Josh Downs this season. Josh Downs is the guy that not only Joe Flacco, but even Anthony Richardson in week 3 twice is going to in the key situations on third and fourth down. That speaks volumes. If you're not familiar with Josh Downs, this is a 2023, so last year, 3rd round pick. He's produced at every single step of his career. We'll go back to college and UNC right here. North Carolina, beautiful place as well. Chapel Hill, look at this right here. In his last 2 seasons there, earns 148 targets, 120 targets. Goes for 1,300 yards and over 1,000 yards. Dude knows how to get open. He produced these numbers with 2 different quarterbacks, by the way. And then last season, as a rookie, when he's competing with guys like Michael Pittman, there's already Alec Pierce there who was expected to do a lot of big things last year. He earns 5.8 targets per game, 98 total targets on the season. Towards the end of the year, he was even playing through an injury. Josh Downs just knows how to produce, knows how to get open, and he's doing it again this year. So you should add Downs right now ASAP before week 6 and before he takes on the Tennessee Titans. The next guy I want to talk about is Demario Douglas. And look, I'm going to be honest, I'm not dying to add like any Patriots players to my teams. Like I don't want any of these dudes on my teams. I'm trying to trade away Ramondre Stevenson right now. Maybe you add in Antonio Gibson as a stash, but I think we should at least give the benefit of the doubt to Demario Douglas and talk about what he's been doing these last few games. Because back in week 3, we talked about Douglas because in week 3 on a Thursday night football game, a short week, he earned a massive 38% target share. Like no other wide receivers for the most part were targeted in this game. Demario Douglas on that Thursday night game for the Patriots from Jacoby Brissett was seeing a lot of usage. Okay, so we said, okay, that's good. But then he follows that up with this performance right here in week 4. He earns just 10% of the targets. That 10% of the targets led to just 3 catches for 13 yards against the San Francisco 49ers, who generally speaking have a solid defense, a lot of playmakers there. But so far this season, they're giving it up in the passing game. What do you get from the New England Patriots and Demario Douglas in that game? Nothing. But let's just hold on a second because this wasn't Demario Douglas's fault. Jacoby Brissett in this game threw for 168 yards. And would it be shocking or crazy if I told you this is a season high through 5 games for Jacoby Brissett, just 168 yards? And if we scroll down to the actual receivers in this game, 67 of those go to Antonio Gibson, 19 go to Ramondre Stevenson. So more than half of the receiving yards in this game were on checkdowns to the running backs. The other receiving yards, 12 to a tight end, check down, 13 to a tight end in Austin Hooper. You're literally getting nearly 75% of the receiving yards in this game, check down. So how are the wide receivers going to benefit downfield? The answer is they didn't and they won't. So obviously that's not great, but heading into this week and the reason why now he's in this video, well, we got Demario Douglas seeing a solid role and picking up more targets. According to Fantasy Life's data right here, you can see Douglas ran 81% of the routes and he earns a 28% target share. So for the second time in the last 3 games, he leads the team in target share, sees at least 28% of them, and he turned this into a usable performance. Once again, for the second time in 3 games, you're getting Demario Douglas, who's a flex option for you. This is again for deeper leagues. I'm not talking about your 8 and 10 team leagues here. 6 catches, 59 yards on 9 targets. This is a guy that in 12 team formats should be, in my opinion, rostered in every single league as long as there's at least 4 or 5 bench spots available. Because Douglas is a solid player. According to Player Profiler, 4.43 speed is absolutely fine, and 95th percentile burst is great. I mean, this is where the guy wins. Whether he's on the outside or moved into the slot, he wins based on his short area quickness, explosiveness, and burst. So look, this offense is absolutely gross. Right now, I think I have a stat here. They're averaging less than 140 passing yards per game. 140, by far the fewest in the NFL. Like, I know the offensive line is terrible and they don't want to ruin Drake May, and I think that they might if they do put him back there, but at this stage, like, you have a fan base. You have to sell tickets. You have to actually put a product on TV. Jacoby Brissett's 136 or whatever it is yards per game aren't getting it done. They want to see the first round rookie, the top 10 overall pick. I think we need Drake May, and I think they're going to be pressured just based on the coaching staff and the organization to not lose their jobs and put in their first round pick, even if that's not in his best interest. But what that could open up is a higher ceiling to this offense, a higher ceiling overall, and that would help Demario Douglas, who so far this season has at least operated as their wide receiver 1, if they even have one. So the takeaway here is in all your 12 plus team leagues, you need to be adding Demario Douglas. The next situation I want to talk about takes us to the Texans wide receiver room because of this man right here. Nico Collins started week 5 with another great game. He was pacing for 2,000 total yards, had a big touchdown, and then all of a sudden, sadly, Nico Collins leaves with a hamstring injury and won't return. Now, as of this recording, we don't know the severity of the hamstring injury, but on average this season, whether it's running backs, whether it's even wide receivers, like AJ Brown, you're probably going to miss at least 2 games. And my friend Sports MD Analysis on Twitter right here, a Harvard-trained surgeon, he ends up saying that this was a re-aggravation. So a re-aggravation, as somebody who is currently dealing with a re-aggravated hamstring, these can take a little bit longer. He's saying on average, though, for an NFL player who has a training staff and every single day they're attending to it, it's going to take about 2 weeks. So there's a chance here that we're definitely going to miss Nico Collins for at least 1 game, potentially 2, potentially even 3 games, although I don't think that's going to be the case, but it's at least in the cards since this was a re-aggravated injury. So what does that do? Well, it makes it so that Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell will be the clear top 2 receivers on this team. Maybe you can finally start getting something from Tank Dell in this, and I think it's going to open up some usage for Xavier Hutchinson, 1, and number 2, the veteran wide receiver, Robert Woods. Now, we can start by talking about Xavier Hutchinson. And you might be wondering, like, why do these guys matter? We know that Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and even Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon should be returning. Like, why do these guys matter? Well, you remember Noah Brown last year? Noah Brown, when Nico Collins was out, got elevated to being a top 3 to potentially top 2 receiver on the team, and he had games back-to-back of 153 yards, 172 yards last year. You scroll down even more, an 82-yard game with a touchdown. I mean, these were huge performances. We're talking top 10 wide receiver performances 3 times. I'm not going to say that's what's going to happen now for a Robert Woods or Xavier Hutchinson, but I do think they're going to see a larger role, and potentially in 12-team formats during the bye week can be a flex option. Now, that would specifically be in your deeper leagues, but let's look what happened this past week in a game where Nico Collins plays just 9 snaps, runs just 5 routes, has that big touchdown, but then he gets hurt. Xavier Hutchinson runs 28 routes, as you can see right here. Number 3 on the team. Robert Woods only ran 8 routes, although it's important to call out Robert Woods entered this game with an injury, but he is a 32-year-old wide receiver, so injuries can linger, and in general, his explosiveness is not as much there as it once was. If you're curious who Xavier Hutchinson is, he was a 6th-round pick last year, and this was a Biletnikoff winner, which a Biletnikoff in college is trying to compete for the number 1 overall wide receiver in the country. He was one of 3 finalists in 2022 season, and then this is the season that got it there. Look at this, 163 target season, over 100 catches, goes for 1,100 yards, earns a massive 34% target share. No matter the season, the target share was good. 24%, then a massive 34% in his Biletnikoff finalist season. So he ended up getting the larger bump up to be the wide receiver 3 in that game in week 5. And what did he do with it? Well, he earned 3 targets, caught 2 of them for 31 yards. Not terrible usage for a guy who was just entering the game cold. You're competing with Stephon Diggs and you're competing with Tank Dell. You didn't have first team snaps in practice that week or get schemed into the offense at all. Now, like we mentioned, we still did have Robert Woods here playing 16 snaps, dealing with an injury. But the problem with Robert Woods is, I'll pull it up right here, and we mentioned it earlier, he's 32 and a half years old right now. Whether it was last year dealing with injuries, already this year dealing with injuries, he's not as much going to be there. And I think this is not a guy you think next year is going to be on your team and be part of your future, where Xavier Hutchinson could be. Maybe Stephon Diggs isn't long for this team. Xavier Hutchinson starts to get molded maybe the next week or 2 if Nico Collins is injured, and that's where in your 12, 14-man leagues with multiple flex spots, maybe you find a bye week replacement. And maybe you also find that replacement in Xavier Legette, who I think is a fantastic option on waivers. I thought he was a top ad last week besides Dontavian Wicks at the position. Look how that went. Still, though, a solid player. Hold on to him. But somehow Xavier Hutchinson or Xavier Legette, a lot of Xaviers here, he is available in over 70% of fantasy leagues still. You can start him this week in week 6. The reason why he became such a popular ad is this right here. Adam Thielen had a hamstring injury, and he's an older wide receiver, so he was placed on IR. It was a severe injury, it seems like. I don't think it was a tear, but going to miss at least 4 weeks. So this made Xavier Legette a very popular ad last week, and it opened the door for him to have more playing time in week 4, and he had a big day. If you recall, we got a 19-point fantasy performance in a nice matchup against the Bengals. He had a couple of carries. I talked about his usage over in the middle of the field, a lot of catch and go routes. It was great, just like you saw in college. Head coach Dave Canales was putting him in the right spots to win. 66 yards, a touchdown on 10 targets, a top 20 wide receiver performance in his first start. That's great. And the goal is heading into week 5, you pick him up off the waivers, you put him in your starting lineup, and okay, maybe you get another 6-7 targets, but if he doesn't even find the end zone, 40-50 yards is like a bare minimum, right? Well, not so fast, because Xavier Legette goes out there and has just 1 target, catches it for 8 yards in a more difficult matchup against the Bears. But the big reason why he didn't get there is because he left early with a shoulder injury in this game and was questionable to return. The game got out of hand. They said that he would have been able to return to this game if it wasn't a blowout. He was fine, and he's going to be okay for week 6. We get that backed up by my friend SportsMD Analysis on Twitter right here, and you can just see he says it's a shoulder. Comments suggest that it's mild. I lean towards him playing in week 6 as a return, so he should be fine to play. We'll check the practice reports this week. Maybe he'll be limited a couple of days in practice, but for the most part, expect him to play in week 6, available in over 70% of leagues, and you can start him in week 6 because the matchup is great. He gets a matchup against the Falcons, who just gave up 3 first-half touchdowns to Baker Mayfield on Thursday Night Football. Then if you look forward in the schedule, great matchup on the road against the Commanders, who are a bottom 5 offense or bottom 5 defense against the pass this season, allowing the 5th most passing yards per play. So go add Xavier Legette, an offense that for the most part is trending up with a coach that is putting him in the right spots to win, and then add this next dude. But before we talk about that guy, over 65% of you are still not subscribed to this channel, and this is the point in the video with the gentleman's agreement. If you made it this far, you find the video helpful, entertaining, engaging, whatever it might be, just hit the subscribe button to pay it back. Gentleman's agreement to this point takes 2 seconds just to make sure you are subscribed. Some people don't even realize it, and there you go. Appreciate it a ton. Hit that subscribe button. The next man I want to talk about is Allen Lazard. He's now nearly a 29-year-old wide receiver. He's basically a glorified tight end, in my opinion, in terms of his speed, his size at like almost 230 pounds. But Allen Lazard is somebody we have to talk about because he continues to see strong usage from Aaron Rodgers. Now, it's not elite usage. It never will be when you're competing with guys like Garrett Wilson seeing a ton of targets, 22 this past week. But Lazard is coming off of solid games, 20% target share, 19% target share, almost just being force-fed out of comfortability from Aaron Rodgers at this point in the season. And Rodgers, the offensive line is falling apart. He's getting the ball out quick to Garrett Wilson, Wilson, but also the other guy he trusts in Lazard. And this usage for Allen Lazard led to a solid game. Like 4 catches on 10 targets isn't great. We need to see that come up, but Lazard is being kind of used as this field stretcher. We saw it at times in Green Bay. He's a slow wide receiver. Using him as the field stretcher, glorified tight end, again, in my opinion, is just really not going to work, but I think they're trying to ramp up Mike Williams still. Maybe his role changes Lazard a little bit. We've seen some deep touchdowns. In this game, you did find the end zone for Lazard, puts up 13 fantasy points in it. You're getting the comfortability. You're getting the 10 targets. Eventually, that will start to translate more to 6 to 7 catches on this type of a usage, but it's just good to see Garrett Wilson is getting a lot of the defense's attention. So is Breece Hall to some extent with the boxes loaded. Some one-on-ones are out there for Allen Lazard right now. And very quietly, you had the 13-point performance this past week. So now in 4 to 5 games this year, week 1, he was a wide receiver 3 overall. Then he has a 13-point game, nearly 11 points. 4 to 5 games, you're getting a guy getting double-digit fantasy points, which so far this year when scoring is down, that's a flex option every week. I think it's time we add Allen Lazard. And now I want to talk about the wide receivers in the Rams receiving core as Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp continue to deal with injuries. Both Jordan Whittington and the rookie, the late round rookie, and Tutu Atwell, I think these guys are still adds who are both available in over 80% of leagues right now. Both these players are coming off of solid games. You can see Tutu Atwell right here. He earns this past week a 22% target share, continues to see his targets downfield. The ADOT, according to Fantasy Life right here, you can see average depth of target, 13.3 yards downfield. He's getting the downfield targets. It's Jordan Whittington, who's still getting a lot of targets, 22% of the targets this past week after 30% the week before that. But as we mentioned last week, not as far downfield. The ADOT just 7 yards downfield, going to lead to less big plays if he doesn't score a touchdown. It'll be hard for him to put up fantasy points unless he's seeing these 10 target games, which recently he has been. Now, in general, these guys should get at least one more game before Cooper Kupp comes back. He's expecting, according to Adam Schefter, a week 7 return. Puka Nacua probably a couple of weeks behind that. So I personally right now prefer Tutu Atwell. I think that Jordan Whittington is the direct replacement based on his role in snaps and where he's playing for Cooper Kupp. So when Kupp returns in week 7, Whittington's basically useless, but I do think Tutu Atwell will continue to play on the outside as sort of the replacement in some regards for Puka Nacua. And really the matchup is just great. At home against the Rams is a solid matchup this week. They'll have matchups later on against the Seahawks, which I think is a nice spot. So if you need a replacement for this week, both of them work. If you're talking about a long-term guy that I would rather add on waivers, if both of them are available, I'd choose Tutu Atwell. The matchup against the Seahawks in a couple weeks is a juicy one. So we talked about Allen Lazard from the Jets, but there's another guy, another pass catcher on the team I think you should be considering, and it's Tyler Conklin, who's available in well over 50% of fantasy leagues right now. I believe I saw a stat on Twitter. I want to make sure I credit it to the right spot, but I just quickly saw it, and then the algorithm updated, and now it's gone. But Tyler Conklin has at least 6 targets in 3 straight games. Only him and Jake Ferguson have done that so far this season. I don't know if I called him Allen Lazard there by accident. I can't even remember at this point, but yeah, Tyler Conklin is an ad, and so is Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, I've said it multiple times this year, I think this is a talented wide receiver. He's opposite Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not getting the defense's attention as much, but he's a big wide receiver. He's 220 pounds. He has solid hands. He's a red zone target, and he continues to produce these 10-plus point fantasy days. So Michael Wilson is an ad, and so is Theo Johnson. Another tight end that the Giants are just making sure that this rookie tight end out of Penn State, they're just making, or second, no, rookie tight end out of Penn State, they're making sure that he gets usage. An extremely athletic tight end, 5 targets, catches them all for 48 yards, gets going in this game. No Malik Neighbors, of course, but they've been using him. They've been using him a lot. They've been scheming him into plays specifically for him the last couple of weeks, giving him more snaps and routes. Somebody in deeper leagues to keep an eye on, especially since the tight end position has been so bad. Now, I do want to bring up Alec Pierce. I get a lot of people saying, why aren't you talking about Alec Pierce? He had 100 yards and another touchdown. It's just because he's not seeing stable usage, right? Like, you're going to get these games where he catches his 150-yard touchdown, makes an insane play like he did with the touchdown and the 24-yard catch where he was falling down. Like, he's a talented player, but there's still 4 wide receivers being used here. Number 1 is Josh Downs. Number 2 is Pittman. Number 3 is Alec Pierce. And this past week, we saw Adonai Mitchell get more involved. So I know he had the big touchdown. I know he's had a couple of 100-yard games so far this season, week 1, now this past week. I'm just not trying to spend waiver priority or my fab budget on Alex Pierce. And the same thing can be said for Darius Slayton, which is crazy because the dude had 11 targets, 29 fantasy points, was a top 10 receiver this week. I believe borderline top 5, 122 yards. But the reason he did this was because Malik Neighbors was out with a concussion, expected to return in the next game. So Darius Slayton goes back to being just really nobody you want in fantasy. So now these are the wide receivers who are priority ads, and the guys we just mentioned are guys you probably shouldn't add this week. But if you want to see the running backs that you need to add, and there's 5 of them this week, really 4 strong ones, well, check out this video right here. It released earlier in the week. That'll help you with your waivers overall this week. Dominate your waiver. I'll see you in the next one. Be sure, gentlemen's agreement, hit that subscribe button before you go.